Hello everybody. Who would have thought at the beginning of this year that we would find ourselves where we are now? That we're trying to live life based on a whole new set of rules. Rules that most of us really don't understand. I mean, can we go out for an hour to exercise? And only once a day? And then we can only go a mile from the house? What about when we go shopping? What can we go shopping for? Some police chief even suggested that the police officers might be searching your bags to make sure you hadn't bought stuff that you shouldn't be buying. And people are getting really het up about what other people are doing. I guess because if we get it wrong, then they're really horrible, unpleasant consequences. Nobody wants to become infected because of what somebody else has done. And this is where we find ourselves in 2020. But at the same time, there have been some positives. I mean, we've had some tremendous services on a Sunday morning online, something that we're doing new and different and taking advantage of modern technology. And we've enjoyed celebrating Easter together. And I think at Easter time, a lot of people have thought about Jesus dying and creating the pathway to salvation for all of us, that we can actually go to heaven and looking at life in an eternal perspective. But I think the other thing about Jesus particularly was that he was much about creating the kingdom of heaven here on earth. He said, I came so that you may have life and life in abundance. He wanted us to enjoy everything that life has to offer. Well, how do we do that today in 2020 with coronavirus and all the difficulties that that's bringing us? Jesus taught a lot about what heaven being on earth is like when he talked to people in the Sermon on the Mount. And particularly in Matthew chapter 6, just after verse 30, he talks about, the birds. It was funny, actually. I was sitting in the kitchen the other day. The sun was shining, and ordinarily this time of year, early in the spring, sun comes out. The first thing we see is gliders climbing up on the thermals, going up and up and up overhead. Not a single glider, but climbing up on the thermals as I'm sitting watching out the kitchen window. There was this red kite, exactly mimicking climbing on the thermal the way the gliders do. And Jesus told us the birds in the field, they have feathers, they have food, they are beautiful to look at. And if my Father in heaven cares that much about the birds, think how much more he will care about you. And he exhorts us not to worry. And I think not to worry is where we need to be today. And if you could summarize all those bits that he says in one way, I think that would be quite helpful. So like today, we're struggling with all these new rules, which you could summarize and say, stay at home. And Jesus does that for us in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33. And he says, the first thing you must seek is the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. What he's talking about is that in our everyday life, in the decisions that we make, in how we interact with people, the kingdom of God should be uppermost in our mind. That's where our thought process should be. So when the neighbours have got all these people coming in and they're having a birthday party, how do we actually seek first the kingdom of God in that situation? Are we getting all grumpy and uptight and they're breaking the rules? Or actually are we trying and react to that with compassion and in a loving manner? When we're walking down the road and people won't stay 2 meters apart from us, how do we seek first the kingdom of God in that situation? When we're struggling with work or family, when the kids are still off of school and coping with that. But Jesus says to us, seek ye first the kingdom of God. And I think if we can make that our rule, our mantra, our guidance, the main principle that we follow in the times that we're still living in these crazy times that we're living in, if we can remember, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and Jesus tells us, you don't need to worry. So really just my thought for these crazy times, in practical terms, stay at home. But when you're staying at home, always remember, seek ye first the kingdom of God.